The river's down there. I'm just taking this back street to get to the Mezquita from my hostel. The main tourist street's right up here, but there's a pretty little fountain in this otherwise nondescript square. Seems to be a heavy Muslim influence all throughout here, as well as my hostel, manned by Abdul, playing Arab music. Another little fountain, quite useful too if you're making ablution to Allah 5 times a day nearby. No surprise about this, just tourists loaded from Europe and America, probably. Canada for sure. Little entranceway with the stairs. Nice tile. Okay, trying very hard to disguise myself as a tourist, of course. Taking a video here of the Mezquita from the outside. Where the entrance is, I'm not sure. Some of the wall detail that remains. It's free to go inside here. It just costs when you start going inside the buildings. I think the cathedral also. But we'll go over and get a ticket. I'm standing in what would be called a cloister in a church. Okay, so orientate. I came in probably where it says enter, somewhere near there. And the first thing you encounter is a patio de los naranjos, which I think means oranges. And that's right up through there, and then we come to this little fountain, if you will, and that's where Muslims would stop there and elsewhere here, probably over history, to perform ablution before they prayed to Allah 5 times a day. There, I think it's the cathedral. And like in Sevilla, the tower is actually built around an earlier mosque minaret. These simple fountains are seen all over this part of Spain, just with a little bit of water trickling out through the top there. I don't know if that was sufficient for anything other than to create the sound of water, which is nice. And I suppose you washed your hands and your face in there, in the pool itself. If you see these little troughs for irrigating the orange trees. We come in here off the patio into this forest of 850 red and white arches and columns. The columns alternately, well not alternately, but occasionally light colored and mostly dark, but with apparently Visigoth designed arches. That's the column and then that arch, and then the arch of the Muslim above that. Correction, the Romanesque arch above that Visigoth one. Referred to as a horseshoe arch, I suspect just because of that little curvature inward right there. Otherwise they look the same. Other than the damn uncontrolled crying kid which shatters the ambience. And other than the hordes of people in here, you can kind of get a sense of a couple of things. One, the curious but interesting aesthetic of all these columns and arches. But number two, the considerable simplicity. Subtract out the simplicity of the arches and a little bit of that column head compared to anything done in the Christian churches. This is extremely simple. Remember, we're in a mosque, but it was converted to a church, and therefore, guess what? Those elaborate chapels over there paid for by the wealthy nobility. Now, as to the columns themselves, most of them are cannibalized from earlier Roman cities and monuments, etc., as well as the earlier conquered Visigoths. Okay, these are remnants of the early Visigoth church mosaics. So notice this predates the Roman. We always think of Roman as being the source of these, but I'm sure mosaics existed long before the Romans. I just never thought about it before. I wonder what this graphic is right here. It looks like an octopus, but I don't know. There's also the absence of anything human or apparently plant or animal, except for maybe over there. Also, it's interesting to note the difference between the concept of this relatively low ceiling that gives this church a sense of intimacy, particularly with the hundreds, if not thousands, that would pray in here, versus the Christian church, which is the exact opposite, reaching to the heavens in the Gothic. Also, the sense of going off into infinity, and we'll let the camera shoot down towards the end of these arches. This may be a Christian addition also. I'm thinking it is. It has that look about it, but I can't be sure. So does that arch in there, that barrel arch, have that look. This is the mihrab. It's the focal point of a mosque. All mosques have one. They just don't have something as elaborate as this. It's normally just a niche. But all of the people who are praying face this. In this case, as many as 20,000 people on their mats. And then the imam, the prayer leader, will yell loudly into this cavity, which then resonates the sound back throughout the church. So this is the most important focal point of this mosque. And if we had the time to study this, we can imagine the incredible detail. For example, in that one panel, which I'll come in and focus on. Imagine if there's an arrow into the 14th century compound. Apparently, this is the zenith of Mudahar, a mix of the Arabic and the Christian designs and elements. This is the mihrab. It's the focal point of a mosque. All mosques have one. They just don't have something as elaborate as this. It's normally just a niche. But all of the people who are praying face this. In this case, as many as 20,000 people on their mats. And then the imam, the prayer leader, will yell loudly into this cavity, which then resonates the sound back throughout the church. So this is the most important focal point of this mosque. If we had the time to study this, we can imagine the incredible detail. For example, in that one panel, which I'll come in and focus on. Imagine if there's an artistic strategy to this work. And is there some theme or purpose to each of these panels, or meaning of each of these panels around the entrance? And these lines up here, no doubt, are Arabic with various important sayings. I want to look more closely up here. Now, what's interesting of these Byzantine artwork is that they do depict flowers, which I thought was a no-no in the Muslim creed. These are architectural remnants of the Visigoth church that existed on this site before the mosque was built. In fact, it cannibalized some of it. None of this is meaningful to anybody but an archaeologist because so much of it could look like what I've seen in other museums all over the world. If you don't know what you're looking at, it doesn't have much meaning. It's interesting, when you think of the Visigoth, you don't think of it having the stature artistically as the Romans, because we're ignorant of the Visigoths anyway, probably because of the Romans' negative propaganda over time. But is it possible that their monuments reflected some of the grandeur that Rome reflect? It certainly appears to be so. You can see the connection between this stone and these photographs, unless it's formed one of the pedestals of those archways. From this corner where the ruins are of the Visigoth, we'll pan so you get some sense of the depth of the church. I'm going to use telephoto in a second and replicate the same pan. So hopefully I can do this and you'll be able to get a sense of depth through here. But it has to be something when you can hear 20,000 people praying. Okay, in the area that I'm standing in behind, which is a roped off area, was an original Visigoth chapel. In 1236, after Ferdinand III had conquered this city and removed the power of the Muslims, he removed 16 of those arches and put in these Christian arches here and turned this into a chapel. Of course, the floor remains littered with the large stones indicating the crypts, if you will, of noble families who chose to pay heavily to be close to God. And for a brief moment, let me see if I can't get above the tourists. Okay, here we go. See. This area that I'm in now is in front of the royal tombs that are blocked off completely from view. But what's fascinating here is in 1370s this was built, and it was built by the Christians using the art of the Muslims by Muslim craftsmen. And what Rick says is that this reflects the mutual respect artistically, and it reflected in the tolerance of the Christians to the Muslims as it had been in reverse before, until the Inquisition, that horrific Catholic crime. I hope that this pan can give some sense of the combination of Christian and Muslim or Arabic design and the beauty of the same. And this is not particularly typical of any of the mosques I've seen at all. Very, very few have much embellishment at all, except to some degree on the outside. Here we can get a look at some of the detail inside over the wall that closes it off. First of all, that statue there. But more importantly for my purposes is to look at this art. Gosh, look at that. That is incredible. You don't have to know what it is to appreciate the incredible complexity of it. Something to be paraded about. These are casts of the signatures, if you will, the stonemasons chopped into the rocks, as they did in Prague Castle, where I first saw a display of that. It's interesting just to get an implication from this board, which is 6 stonemasons that actually worked on this. They're rather different, although you can just see they put it in prominent places, which is interesting that they even were allowed to get away with that. Another chance, when it seems to be a little bit empty, to get a sense of the ambience that might have been here. And I'll try to put this panel, or this clip, without audio. For this pan, I'm going to try to, first of all, show how the cathedral is embedded inside the mosque and give some sense of the contrasts of architecture. And this is my first view of the cathedral. White with gold paint, it looks like, as etched trim. Spectacular in its height and beauty, really. Here, perhaps the shot that most expresses it, shooting at the altar of the Christian 16th century church, or earlier, and through these Muslim arches. It was in 1523 that Cordoba's bishop suggested that this building be built, this cathedral, and Ferdinand III favored that, although there was many against it. Choir, perhaps as elaborate as almost any that I've seen. Beautiful carving, of course, even if I don't know what the carving is of. It just looks spectacular. Now we're looking to the west, back from the altar. And here a barrel arch, even though this is late Gothic. Well, maybe that is what late Gothic is. I'm going to quote from Rick Steves' guide here as to the contrast between, or the comparison between the Islamic and the Christian aesthetics and psychology of Catholic Church versus Islam. Horizontal versus vertical. Intimate versus powerful. Fear-inspiring versus loving. Dark versus bright. Simple versus elaborate. Feeling close to God versus feeling small before God. And I'll add my own irony. Isn't it the bully that tries hard to make the person they're attacking feel small by humiliation? Isn't that epitomizing the Catholic Church in a nutshell? Isabeline. I assume that refers to Ferdinand's Isabel. But was she a creative person who inspired this kind of architecture? Presumably. The strategy of the creator of this choir, which is considered to be a masterpiece of 18th century Andalusian Baroque, these 109 stalls, is a scene from the Bible. And apparently on one side is Mary's life facing the life of Jesus on the other. You can imagine with all the churches in existence that do this kind of thing, Christian, Catholic churches, whatever, that the strategy, coming up with a strategy for the multiplicity of panels here, not to mention to differentiate yourself from other churches, must be a very trying task. And these lower chairs feature carved reliefs of the 49 martyrs of Cordoba. It'd be interesting to know how many martyrs the church has created, and then compared to the number of knights the Queen of England has created. And you'll notice that each has a palm in their hand, indicating as a symbol of martyrdom, and the scene of their death in the background. But Rick does not explain who these busts are under the arm rest of each of these chairs. Now here our tour guide manages to take advantage of a classic wrong way of teaching or of students learning, and that is, and yet take advantage of this history here by seating them in chairs in the choir so she can then lecture to them. If we will look closely at their faces, or some of the ones we can see right now, they're clearly not paying attention to anything she has to say. The Japanese crowd has earphones that the guide uses, and the rest of them in Germans don't. Why isn't it an absolute rule like it is up in Portugal? This wall dividing the choir from the rest of the cathedral is very interesting. I assume that these are pieces of different colored marble that have been carved and inlaid into this wall. I wonder if the people who spoke from these pulpits were inspired by the grandiosity of the context. In other words, the pulpit, the church behind them. Did they feel the glory of God in them, the power of God as they lectured the masses, including the important people of their society who had to listen, who perhaps even wanted to, who may have actually believed? The stained glass looks pretty for some reason. The top of it seems to be flowery. As though it were an arbor of flowers, and perhaps, no, it looks like, I'm not sure what's up there. I can't see it that well. And here again, the contrast. Now I'm just hunting for interesting perspectives or views. Coming off those Gothic-like arches on the ceiling, that's a barrel vault, not a Gothic arched vault. One of the best examples of the mix is the arches and the converted chapels. Here in the right transept, if you are facing the altar, and now shooting towards the back of the church, or the entrance really. Of all the churches I've been in here in Spain, and probably other countries too, I just don't want to allude to them, this is one of the most refreshing because not only of the philosophy of tolerance, but the architectural mixing of these two great architectures and great religions, great in the sense of size. It seems intellectually refreshing. It seems aesthetically refreshing to my psyche. According to Rick, there used to be more light here until the Christians filled in a lot of the external arches. But actually, I think this creates a beautiful intimacy, although I'm not sure they had lamps like this at the time. I wonder if there's a symbolism to this heavily sculpted arches. which are horseshoe, I think. Now it's interesting that right here, the level or grade of the mosque elevates about 1.5 feet maybe to the ultimate grade of the cathedral. I wonder if that, well, it's obviously intentional, but I wonder what the point of that was. Just imagine what an experience it was for a Christian to be entering to the cathedral through the mosque each time they went to church. That's an interesting concept. What effect did it have? Did that enhance tolerance? You would hope so. Now that's an iPad case. Imagine what's in there that no one will ever see, except for the guy that changes the light bulb. Just notice at the bottom of this pulpit looks like an eagle who's landed on top of a cow, but it looks like that's blood, and perhaps underneath the talons of the eagle. So we'll go, I think, and see if we can find the 14th century synagogue. Calle de Judíos probably tells us we're in the old Jewish section. It's the synagogue, and it's apparently closed. The square I just wandered up to. Taking us out through this wall into an area adjacent to the wall filled with restaurants. And we're into the 5 minute and we're running out of tape. Pretty esplanade outside the walls. Inside that puerto that I just walked out of, and this modern water feature. There, the puerto that I just walked out of. It's cool. This waterway is a series of little falling lakes, if you will, or pools, with a whole bunch of check dams to allow it to go slowly down in height. Here outside the wall, I've walked down alongside of are two more puertos or entryways with a nice patio and water feature outside this one, and this kind of plaza here with restaurants so you can relax, particularly if you live in the neighboring areas, which is lots of apartment units, these upper floors. Another chunk of old wall. I don't know what its lineage is. Maybe there'll be a sign down here somewhere. We'll pursue it. It says what it was. For sure, it's all the facing stone has been lost, unless that's eroded facing stone there. And it's been, you know, what's left, fortunately, bolstered up. Some event taking place to the right of us inside there. Right outside this building here is a large horse arena where they have equestrian shows, but inside here, where it used to have stalls, are now a museum of different buggies. Must have housed a heck of a lot of horses. I would say like 50 or 60. Perhaps my guess is that it was something to do with the government, with the king or whatever, originally. Probably in one form or another, the same kind of coaches were used in the United States. We just don't see much evidence of them anymore. I mean, even in museums. I guess there's museums for them, but not out west. It's interesting how this may have provided, I don't know if this provided water or just, no, it's just a way to, place to tie up your horse. This would have provided, looks like it probably had some kind of control. It wasn't used that long ago, considering that kind of steel mesh, stainless steel mesh tubing down there. It's cool, a chariot. A wagon. You can look inside, nice little upholstered little chairs, although there's not enough room for anybody to sit, doesn't seem like. I don't know what the handle is for. I think that may have been the braking mechanism. A view of what's called the Roman Bridge, but apparently only the foundation is. Comment what it was done on, like so much along here, on the cheap. An old water wheel, now embedded into that island that it's. Looks like it's enclosed on, probably been filled in by just the silt that's come down, that's filled the river in. What's interesting is that horseshoe or Muslim-shaped old window there. In turn, looks like it was filled in with a Christian arch. Here you would say a mix of Gothic and Romanesque arched doorways or windows, whatever. This is kind of a lounge room. It's the most comfortable one I've been in most hostels. It's designed for taking tea, of course. That's what these, I forget what they call them are. They're for smoking, I think. But the room is for tea, so you can buy different kinds of tea, and there's shops that have different kinds of tea. I called this room Muslim, and Abdul corrected me and said, no, not Muslim, but Moroccan. That's the distinction. Not clear whether it's a distinction as to nationality versus religion or what. But anyway, what's nice about it is comfortable, relaxed feeling. The couches are comfortable. You have the rug. That furniture is very, very nice. It's one of those settings you made a little corner of your house like. Reception for the hostel. It's interesting that they have there the names of the people, first names of the people who are coming in. This man gets his exercise and his little bit of money by cleaning tables in this little place. So we definitely leave a tip for him.